Looking for real stories that lift you up? Welcome to Inspire and Impact, the podcast where purpose meets perseverance. This is where transformation begins and your story continues.
Welcome to the Inspire and Impact podcast. I'm your host, Daniel Rosenstein. The show features real conversations with thought leaders, healers, entrepreneurs, and creatives to share journeys of growth, purpose, and making meaningful impact. Today, I have the honor of interviewing Liz Carney. Liz, thank you so much for coming on the show today.
Thank you for having me. It's my pleasure.
Can you share a little bit about your background and history and how you got to where you are today with the audience?
Yeah, sure. My history is, a life on a roller coaster, basically, is how you might describe it. Had it all, lost it all, and then picked it all back up again. Typically school, university, big job, another big job. But then, and I got married. I lived in the States for a while. I was, living the dream, basically. And then, to understand what happened, I need to take you back to the summer of 2001. And basically, I'm sitting in my car at the side of the road, and tears are just pouring down my face, and I am completely distraught. And literally, my life is just flashing in front of my eyes. 3 scenes in particular that have just happened, and I am reliving them over and over. The first, I'm in a clinical cold white room, and this nameless, faceless man walks in, and I hear the words, "The good news is we repaired the aneurysm." Wow. Unfortunately, he said, we were unable to revive him because his body temperature and his blood pressure were too low. That is how I learned that my father had died. Then the next scene that flashes in front of me, I'm in the coziness of my own bedroom with the moon coming through the window, and then there's this disembodied voice, and I hear, I'm leaving you tomorrow. You just don't do it for me anymore. And that was how my husband ended our marriage. And if that's not enough, the third scene that is flashing in front of my eyes, I'm in a basement office, and I can smell that, stale furniture polish and old furniture and musty carpets. And all I can see is pictures of old ships. And as I look at him, he's fidgeting and, messing with his tie. And I hear the words, "I don't have another job for you. We have to let you go." And in that moment, that was the third part of the trilogy. So the life I knew was literally destroyed in a space of just a few months. So I'm sitting there in the wreckage of my life, basically, between an appointment with the employment lawyer and the divorce lawyer. That was 2001. Obviously, I picked myself up and, basically rebooted my life. And what does that mean? I mean, yeah, it was devastating. I went to work. I got another job, and I traveled the world, and I had an amazing job. I was training and coaching all around the world, another multinational. And then the other shoe dropped 10 years later. And once again, I kind of had outstayed my welcome. Nobody's ever fired me. There's kind of payoffs to these incidents. I never did anything wrong. I always did a great job, and everybody told me. But there comes a point. Only this time, 10 years later, it had a different effect. And for a while, I was devastated again. And then I'm just literally walking through my house, and my eyes just glance at a photo of my dad. And in that moment, I hear his words. And what does he say? I hear him saying, Liz, don't let the bastards get you down. Don't let them win. You can do whatever you want. You can do anything. You know you can. Just get on with it, girl. And I'm thinking, yeah, I can. And in that moment, I decided nobody was ever going to bully me again. Nobody was going to sideline me again. Nobody was ever going to put me in the corner, if you like, and talk over me and ignore me. In that moment, I decided I am going to start my own business. And that's what I did. And that was November 2011. And I started off doing what I knew. So helping small businesses with their processes and their strategy and basically consulting. I found myself doing, lots of coaching of those small businesses. And so I qualified as a master coach, and that is what I have been doing ever since. I tend to work with women now who have had it all and lost it all, and I help them to actually find out who they truly are and where they want to be, and to get to that place where they can live life on their terms.
Wow, that's a really amazing story. Thank you so much for sharing that. Can I ask you, like, what was going through your mind, when you said like that, when you called the trilogy happened, when like your father passed away, you got divorced. I mean, that's to have all those events happen back to back. That's extremely overwhelming. I mean, what was going through your mind at that time? Did you really feel like, what the heck is going on here? This is
Yeah. I mean, it's completely devastating.
Yeah.
I had a good life, and I felt like the rug had been completely pulled out from under me. I didn't know who I was anymore. I didn't know what my purpose was. I didn't know what I was supposed to do anymore. And obviously I couldn't talk to my dad. He was always my sounding board, and I couldn't speak to him because he was gone. And so I didn't even tell anybody. I didn't tell anybody about my husband going for 3 months. Not a soul. But then, when the job went as well, I really just didn't know what I was going to do. I just, what is the point? I've worked so hard and everything, and, supported a family, built a beautiful home. We had great holidays. We went skiing in the winter. We had summer holidays. We had weekends away. We had a great life. And it just felt like suddenly it's all gone. And there aren't actually the words that can describe the feelings that go through your mind. I suppose if I was to put some random words on it, there was shame, there was guilt, there was, it's not supposed to be like this. So, what did I do? What could I do differently? What could I have done differently? And that's kind of why I decided to work with women, because I started talking about what had happened. And particularly when I started writing my book, so many women came to me and said, "You are telling my story." And I realized that it wasn't just me that this happened to. So many women, particularly, once you get over the age of 50, they get traded in for a younger model, both at work and at home. Often, parents are dying, or they're dealing with, sick, aging parents. And add on to that, the kids leave home. So there's this empty nest as well. And from having held it all together and put everybody first, it is very, very unbalancing to suddenly have no control and to literally not know who you are anymore.
Wow, that's really amazing. I mean, you're saying like you start your coaching based on like women coming to you and saying you're telling us your story, but what made you feel like you want to actually help other people, be a coach?
Wow. I suppose in some respects, my entire corporate career, I've had some senior positions, I've worked around the world. I have coached people like my entire career. I mean, I've turned people's lives around. I inherited one job and I went in there and I had a list of people who were on disciplinary, who were being managed out of the business, things like that. And I'm like, okay, let's take another look at this. And I can say that nobody left the business. I turned them all around. There was one girl in particular. She was a complete nightmare as somebody who was, her manager. And she was literally 1 foot out the door. I sat her down and I talked to her and I found out what was really going on. Not just the presenting symptoms, not what's on the surface, but what was really going on. And then from that point, I was able to say to her, okay, how are we going to fix this? Because you have two choices right now and you're very close to not having a choice. So if you want to stay here, if you want a job, then something has to change. So between us, we found a way to change that. And I have to say, she completely turned everything around, turned her life around. And inside of a year, not only was she not fired, which she was very close to, we were able to make her a supervisor. And that is an inspiring story, from the workplace. And I learned then, and I suppose some of it I've always done instinctively anyway. I know that you have to understand what the problem is. And you have to, when you understand the problem, then you can actually find an appropriate solution. And so really the work that I do, when I was doing a lot of my corporate work, when I was training and traveling and coaching around the world, I was actually fixing broken processes in the workplace and teaching people how to improve their processes. And what I realized was the principles are exactly the same. So life is a process. And you can apply those same principles of improving a process to the process of life. So if you're looking at a business process, something's gone wrong, and there's three main areas. It will be costing time, it'll be costing money, and it will be due to poor service. Okay, time, cost, and quality are always the three elements. Now, if you think about that in the context of life, whatever is going on in your life that isn't as you want it, there is an element of time. You might be spending too much time doing things that you don't want to do in a job that you don't love, or spending time with people that you don't want to be around, that they've got demands on you, and that you can't be with the people that you do want to be with. And then you have to think about, what's the financial, fallout from that when you're not doing what you want or with the right people. You might just be having to work, 3 jobs to make ends meet. And then what does that do to your quality of life? So same thing. It's time, cost, and quality, in this case, quality of life. So I evolved my system to help people improve the process of life. And I don't know if that answers the question of why did I do it? I've always done it. And then I realized that I could utilize some of my existing business skills to help people on a personal level.
Oh, that's really amazing. They were able to make that adjustment. I know like you were trained in Six Sigma. Can you maybe explain to the audience, for the people who don't know, what is like Six Sigma?
Six Sigma, in its purest terminology, the definition, Six Sigma is a statistical measurement. So Six Sigma is about there only being 3.4 opportunities for something to go wrong in a million opportunities. So if you make a million widgets, then if you are achieving Six Sigma in your process performance, then only 3.4 of those million may have something wrong, may have some level of defect. Now, that is quite a high number. Most businesses operate at around 3 Sigma, because they're not mission critical operations. Airlines and organizations like that, where it's much more, there's human life at risk and everything, then you're going to be at 8 Sigma, because you can't have 3.4 air crashes per every million flights there are. So that explains the statistics behind it. It was actually invented by Motorola, and then it was made famous by General Electric. So I got trained by two of the guys that actually worked for General Electric when they first brought it out. So essentially, it is about looking at your processes in your business and understanding how they are performing or underperforming. And then you look at ways to improve that performance with those three elements that I mentioned earlier: time, cost, and quality. So your process, you're looking at how long does it take? How much is it costing me? What is the quality that my customers are getting at the end of it? Are they getting the goods and services as they want, as they expect? And if not, why not? What can we do about it? You always measure from the perspective of the customer, the person on the receiving end, because they're the ones that obviously keep your business afloat. They're the ones who you are serving. And that's basically what it is. It's about improving processes. So that the term mystifies people, but actually when you break it down, there's nothing very kind of mystical about it at all.
I mean, how do you use that like training to help people, like, in your coaching?
My system, my reboot protocol is based on the whole Six Sigma cycle. You may have heard of the DMIC cycle, define, measure, analyze, improve, control, which it's pretty famous how Six Sigma is set out. And the organization that I used to work for, a major multinational organization, we had a version of that. And then I looked at it and I realized, hang on, I'm doing the same thing here with my coaching clients, because the very first fundamental principle, which is the R, my system is called the Reboot Protocol. And the R in Reboot stands for review. And what are you reviewing in the context of what I'm coaching, how I help people? You are reviewing your life. And the purpose of that is to understand what is the problem, which is where you always start with a process. So it's your life you're looking at. What is the problem? And most people, this is what I find, the majority of people that I come across initially, they cannot articulate what the problem is. They know things have gone south or whatever, but you have to dig a little bit deeper to understand the whole picture. So that's the review part, the first bit of define what is going on. It's the foundation piece. If you don't understand what's going on, you cannot find, a transformation or an appropriate solution that's going to work. What tends to happen is majority of people will jump straight from this is what I think the problem is to, this is the solution. They listen to their mates, their best friend or their mate down at the pub in the bar, who says this is what happened to somebody I know, and this is what they did. And I say to people, hang on, that guy isn't you. That friend of yours, their life isn't your life. Their problem is not your problem. There may be similarities, but what is going on for you? Let's get clear on that. Then we can move forward. And then the next piece, the E in Reboot, is all about further evaluation and understanding, energy, and that perhaps the people in your life, the energy vampires. people who are sucking the time away from you when perhaps you want to do different things with your time. And, understanding how, everything in your life and everyone in your life is contributing to the situation that you're in now. So that, the first two pieces are all about understanding, if you like, the current situation, which is where you start with Six Sigma. What's the problem? Now let's, get a bit deeper on this and find out more about the problem. Then when you've got all that, because now you have data, you probably have some numbers and some clarity, then you can actually start looking at where do you want to go. You baseline some form of vision. And in my program, the B is baseline, and you're baselining your vision. And what happens with vision, I find, many people, and I love vision boards. Most people don't know how to do them properly. Most people don't use them right. And they think you cut out lots of pictures and stick them on a board and put them on the wall, or worse, digitize them. And, there's your energy's not in it there then. And then sit and look at it and wait for something to happen. Doesn't work. I mean, they have their purpose, and I go into that. Or alternatively, people pick up one little thing. They think, oh, this is the solution to my problem. Like it used to be back in the day, IT was the solution to every business problem. And as soon as you put a new system in and it doesn't work, you start to realize, actually, no, IT is not the solution. So what happens is people pick on one tiny little bit, which doesn't solve the full problem, or doesn't solve it at all, or only solves a tiny bit of it. So this is, it's like understanding clearly, where do you want to be instead of where you are now? What's in the gap? And then, creating a statement of where you want to be, that, that clear vision, but also taking into account what is practical and what is possible. Let's get realistic about this. And then, if you want, I can carry on with the rest of the reboot, which is my version, how I have adapted the Six Sigma DMIC framework to, to dealing with people in crisis in life, improving the process of life. So the O is, the first O is all about objectives. And that is actually just simply about breaking down your big goal into, bite-sized chunks, what your objectives are, because you've probably got objectives in different parts of your life, your relationship, your work or business, your spirituality, your learning, family, home, finances. So you've got, potentially different aspects that you need objectives for. So that breaks it into bite-sized chunks so you can work out where you are. Then the next piece, I call it, optimize your plan. Basically, that you got to have it fits in, you got a second O in reboot. And we all know, fail to plan, plan to fail. And it's simply then creating a robust plan to actually deliver those objectives, which achieve your goal, close the gap, and solve the problem. And then you might be wondering, what's the T? The T is the actual transformation, because just like in business, when you fix something, you have to monitor it. You have to see what is going on. So you improve a process, you put measures in place, and you go at, defined periods, and you actually check, is this new process delivering what I expect? Is it saving me money? Is it taking less time? Are the customers getting better quality? The same with life. You have created a change, you're doing something different. However, we know, the thing about life is that it throws you curveballs again. And so what I help my clients do there is to, rather than fall back, to have strategies for coping, if you like, to understand how to deal with, when the next thing happens, so they don't just, fall apart again. They have got support and strategies to keep themselves, in a good place. And hopefully that answers that question.
Yeah, I think it's absolutely incredible. I mean, you obviously spent like a lot of time creating your method. And I think it's so amazing you're able to take something you learn from like the corporate world and implement into like people's lives. I mean, I don't think I've seen anybody else ever do that before. Like the way you do it, like in such a thorough and like detailed way, and it's really amazing. I mean, as I was listening to you, I was curious to know because a lot of people talk about vision board. You see, a lot of people aren't not doing it correctly. I mean, what is you said? Isn't this something simple like you just put like the picture of things that you like on a board, and then you're good to go? I mean, what's missing about that?
Oh, right, Liz. This is part of my program. I used to do a course all about vision boarding as well. Yeah, when I first learned about vision boarding, they were actually called prosperity maps, and that was when I lived in Florida, coming up to probably nearly 40 years ago when I lived in Florida, and then they were called prosperity maps, and same thing basically, but there's a few tricks to it, about setting intention, about going inside, doing some inner work first, understanding what it is you want to achieve, not just pretty pictures, owning it, literally owning it, putting your name on it, labeling it, putting yourself in there. The number of people who show me their vision boards, and I go, where are you? Where are you in that vision board? They're not there. When I do mine, there's a picture of me in the middle of it. And then there might be, an area which is about business and an area which is about the home and areas about relationships and so on. And, this is how, my vision board, I created the vision of my house in Italy where I live now. And it's quite fascinating how that has come about. And I'm right there, right in it. The renovation is not complete yet, but it's coming through. And there is a bit, I have to say, there is some woo-woo around this as well. But let's just say it's not just about cutting out pictures randomly of things that you like and sticking them, on a board somewhere and staring at them, hoping that something's going to change, because invariably it won't. That piece, there's a pre-piece, there's the actual creation of the vision board, which, if I do that as a workshop, there is perhaps a closed eye meditation piece and an intention and some music and people really visualizing, putting themselves in the place where they want to be, and then getting in touch. I mean, I'm going into the realms of Dr. Joe Dispenza here and others like that, whereby you feel what you will feel when this vision is a reality, and you tune into the emotions and you feel what you feel. And this is all part of if I'm doing vision boards, it's all part of my process, because if you study some of that stuff, you're creating the neural pathways, and you are I don't know, I don't want to say you're tricking your brain, because but you believe, you act as if it's already happened, it's a done deal. And I created the vision of my house here in Italy, and then not just on the vision board but inside my mind. And I actually would walk around this house in my mind, and I would visualize the rooms. I could walk around the rooms, and I could go out on the terrace, and I could see the people there, having a glass of wine and having a meal. And I could see the mountain and the views and everything. And hey, here it is. But that is the tip of the iceberg. There's a lot. You can't just do a vision board and not do anything else. The universe, if you like, responds to, your belief, your intention, when you are feeling all the feels, like, you're in touch, the emotion that you feel, that, when it's happened, and you keep repeating that, that is how you create, this has already happened. I don't know if that sounds a bit far out or.
Yeah, I mean, I'm familiar with some of those teachings. I've read some of Joe Dispenza's books. I took some of his classes, and I saw the movie The Secret, which talks about law of
Yeah.
manifesting. I read a book from Neville Goddard. He says feeling is the secret, like with the emotions. I mean, he's probably one of the pioneers, I think, like in the self-help world, in terms of coming up with some of these ideas. He said, like working with your emotions to help manifest what you want. It's really amazing in a way, like how life really works. And he said, but like you said, these things can actually be taught. Like there's skills and like mind training. As you said, it's not just a simple, well, I cut out a picture and like, yeah, that's what I want. It's actually like what I call mind training. Is it training your mind to think a certain way and to believe like this is possible? And for many people, like you said, people can manifest a new home, a new relationship. It's always really amazing. But can I ask you, since you work in such a different ways, like in the corporate world, you were dealing with like statistics, numbers. Like, how do you deal with measuring success with your coaching clients now?
Okay, it's literally, I get the testimonials that are like,
Wow.
people come to me and say, since I started working with you, my business has taken off. I know how to make decisions. I have so much more confidence. I had one client that I've been working with, and I could see how much progress that she had made. And then I get this email going, oh, no, it's all gone horribly wrong and it's not going as I wanted it to. And basically, I just sent her a very calm message back. And I said, you're doing great. You're on the right track. I am seeing what you are doing. But Rome was not built in a day. She was somebody who absolutely hated social media. So she didn't put any posts on, and she needed to reach out to people on social media. And I'm like, I've checked your accounts. You have 27 friends on that one, and on the other one, you've got, I don't know, 17 followers or something. You need to keep posting and build up your audience because, more people need to see it. And, and it literally took another 3 or 4 weeks. And she said, thank you so much. I did exactly what you said. And this has picked up, and I have got more clients doing this, and I have got interest on this, and I ran this workshop and this happened. And so she says, just as you said, it's all moving forward. It's about teaching them the strategies as to what to do, because she hit a bump in the road, because the bumps in the road do not go away. And if somebody removes those bumps in the road, then another one pops up, as we know. So it's not about getting rid of them necessarily. It's about understanding how you deal with them so you can carry on. You can continue with doing what you love and creating the life that you want. So it's things like that. I get, one guy said to me, and this guy was, I don't know, 67 or something at the time. He just said, you are the best coach I've ever had. And he said, since working with you, and he wasn't a young person, okay? So he said he's had plenty of coaches. And I'm able to make decisions. His decision was to give up his business and retire and sell his house and move. And it's all about, as I said at the beginning, understanding what's the problem? What is it that people are not happy with? Where do they want to be instead? And then looking at what's in the gap so that they can, I don't tell them what to do. They work out what it is they then need to do. I just give them, if you like, I shine a torch on it and show them what they're not seeing. One guy that I worked with many years ago, he actually said to me, he said, I don't know how she does it, because it's all inside your head and somehow she gets it out of you. And that's kind of how I work. I find out what's inside your head, get it out, unscramble it, and that's how people get clarity for, because people who need coaching are usually, if you like, scrambled in some way. Life has, dealt them one or more, blows that are, not good for them. And sometimes it's like being on the hamster wheel. You go round and round and round. That is your life, your job, your relationship, your home situation, whatever. And they can't figure out how to get off. And that's what I help them with.
That's really amazing. I mean, thank you for sharing that. Sounds kind of incredible, like everything you're saying. Can I ask you though, since you say you predominantly work with women, what do you see as some like the common patterns or issues that they're dealing with, or some like their beliefs that that they're facing?
The most of the women, have come out of the other side of relationship issues, divorce. It's that same pattern: the divorce, the empty nest, the sick, aging, dying parents, the loss of a job, or just being sidelined at work. The number of women that say to me, and I'm talking women who have had good jobs, senior positions. I'm not talking just I'm talking people who have been fairly high in the food chain as well, but it is across the spectrum, and that they've been sidelined, and they say to me, I just don't feel like I have a voice anymore. Nobody is listening to me. And the thing is, I don't know if this is something that it's still the case. Women have moved ahead in the workplace a lot compared to where they were, say when my mother or my grandmother was working. But still, it's almost, there's a sell-by date. And it's like suddenly, women are not perceived as, past a certain age, it's like you don't have as much value. Now, I don't know if that has something to do with, other changes that women go through at that time of life as well. There's plenty of coaches that deal with that. That quite often comes up, in terms of they're not taken so seriously because, perhaps they're a little bit more emotional, hormones all over the place, one thing or another. And there's this generalization of women over a certain age, perhaps don't perform as well, which is complete and utter nonsense. But when those things start to happen, that's when women typically who have always put everybody else first and themselves last suddenly go, now what? What was it all for? What's my purpose now? What do I do? Because literally suddenly the kids have gone, the husband's gone, the job's gone, and it's what do I do? Who am I? Also, because the person they were, the girl who wanted to do, who had all the dreams and aspirations, maybe as a teenager and a young adult, maybe got married, had a child or children, and kind of suppressed all of that, and lost their dreams along the way, perhaps. That happens to a lot of women, and then suddenly they pop out the other side of that by whatever means, and then they have been, the mother, the wife, the daughter, the employee, even the manager or the leader, the whatever, and suddenly it's like they don't have any of that, and they're like, who am I? And the person they were originally is buried somewhere behind all the masks that they've been wearing. So another part of the process is to help take those masks off and find out, what lies beneath, if you like, who's really there, and what does that person want now that, perhaps they've got the, they don't see it like this at the time, but they've now got the freedom to bring that person back to the world and do what they want, make their own choices.
That's like really amazing. Can you tell us more about like the 10 shocking patterns of a professional woman in crisis?
I can. Let's just think. I've got them here somewhere. I remember them off the top of my head because they're typical. And the first obvious one is something's out of balance. And this particular, test, you can do this on my website, and it's also in my book. So usually the first thing is, something's out of balance, or people recognize that they're hiding behind a mask, not that they're being, themselves and open and all the rest of it. Another pattern is, the pattern of not knowing who you are anymore. That is a key one, and that usually people score quite low, in terms of, the identity there. The first one's the imbalance. The second one is, the image, who am I? Sort of, who am I pretending to be, if you like? And then how am I hiding? What's my real identity? And then, the individual piece, do they go with the crowd, or do they stand out, or do they prefer to, be at the back of the room and be invisible? And that reminds me of another client, and she just, somebody I'd known for a while, I'd worked with, and she, I need to speak to you again. I've got this issue. When we and she literally was always at the back of the room. She never put herself forward. She was, she was convinced that her problem was because she was naturally shy. When we dug a bit deeper, we found out what the real problem was. It was a childhood issue. I mean, it was nothing nasty. It was something that happened when she was 6 years old. And what happened, then she was, be quiet, don't, go away, be quiet, settle down, don't bother us. So she then spent the next 50 years being quiet and not bothering anybody. It had, like, embedded, when I was talking about building the neural pathways, this is what happens. You build those neural pathways that create those patterns. So we have to find out what they are and, give them a do-over. Because once we actually discovered what was really the root cause of what was the matter with her and why she was like this, and basically she turned into a new woman. Her partner of 32 years at the time said to me, what have you done? What have you done with her? I didn't recognise her. Luckily, they're still together. No harm done there. But she got so much more confidence. She worked out what was going on. Her business boomed. Her relationship blossomed again, been in a bit of a dip. And the best bit was, from the person at the back of the room, she found herself at a conference on a stage, on a panel with a microphone in front of a huge audience. And I'm like, yeah, go girl. And, that was, the confidence thing and that transformation, just from finding out what was causing this behavior, what was causing this pattern of, having to hide. And it was easily resolved. So that, the individuality thing, integrity, how often are you true to what you really want, or do you just go along with what everybody else? Are you in a peer group? Do you just go along with with what other people want, whether it's at work, at home, in your relationship, or do you stick to your own beliefs and be true to what you want? And I guarantee you, an awful lot of women, particularly, do not. I already mentioned the influence piece. That women get to a certain point where they feel like they're not heard, nobody listens to them anymore, and so they start to shut up and not actually feel comfortable to express their views and opinions. And then the impact is another one. The impact of along with losing the voice, you lose the impact, and the result of that over and over is to get to a point where you say, what's the point? I'm not gonna bother anymore. And sometimes become disengaged at different levels of life. But then also, with everything that's going on, perhaps there is a time where some creativity's gone, the imagination is not operating as perhaps it should, or it's in overdrive. You're either closing it down and not being creative, or quite often, particularly in relation to relationships, the imagination is in overtime, creating things which perhaps you think might have happened, you're imagining stuff. That's the opposite side of that. Then, interdependence is the other one. Are you independent or are you completely dependent on others? It's not entirely the same now as it used to be generations ago, but there are still women who, depend entirely on another person to look after the house and pay the bills and manage the finances and things like that. And suddenly, they find themselves having to deal with that, for example. So then they're not independent. And then, the last one of those patterns is intuition. And it's a key, when we're looking at patterns, that if we don't listen to our intuition, we're not being true to ourselves. And quite often, the intuition that's there with everybody also gets closed down, and you almost know that there are things that you want to do and that you should do, and you just go, no, I'm not going to do that for whatever bizarre reasons. Another part of this is learning how to tap back into and listen to your intuition. And this is all part of really rediscovering, what I do with my clients, rediscovering who they are and what they actually want. And it's quite an eye-opener doing that evaluation, for each of those 10 patterns to determine, where they are on a scale of, 1 to 10. You add them all up, out of 100, nobody gets 100. Most people come in, around the, 60 or something. But heck, even though that's over 50%, there's a huge gap there. 40% is not right. And, my job is to ask the question, what has to happen to make each of these a 10 out of 10? How do we get your life overall to be a 10 out of 10? What would your life have to look like? Because, we established that it isn't a 10 out of 10, so what's in the gap?
Wow, that's really amazing. Can I ask you, so like you talked about, people going through different challenges in life. How can women use like crisis as a catalyst for live a better life versus, feeling overwhelmed or collapsing?
It's just, you've always got the choice. You can collapse into it and be a victim. That is, and often people do that. And it's a case of understanding exactly what part you play in all of this, what choices you have made along the way. Now, I am not trying to, diminish anything that happens to people, but I guarantee that, wherever you find yourself, you will have made decisions and made choices that, do have a part to play in how you got there. And you are now in a position where you have choices as to what happens next. And if you, I'm just trying to think, if you think about Tony Robbins, something that, a lot of what he says sticks in my mind, or, well, it kind of disappears into the back of my mind and pops out at random moments. What's just popped into my mind is one of the things that he says, which is, where did you go? Oh, sorry. I don't know what happened there. Something cut in. So he says, whatever you say I am in front of, you own that. So that is something else that I work with my clients on, in terms of, what are you saying to yourself? What are you thinking about yourself? And remember, if you're saying I am, what are we thinking of? I'm unlovable, I am, nobody cares about me, I don't have a voice. All those kinds of things, you're putting that on yourself, and you're feeding those neural pathways and making them stronger. So you have the opportunity to choose something different, instead of, I'm, I'm poor, I'm fat, I'm ugly, I am useless, I am not worthy of anything. It's, I'm awesome, I'm amazing, I'm fabulous, I am, and affirmations, your thoughts and words actually can create your reality. So that is something that just popped in there. And one of the things I always listen when I'm working with clients, and sometimes I go, oh, stop. What did you just say? And, they're somehow using some form of negative language that they are owning. And which means they're going to perpetuate that situation unless they start to pay attention and change that. And it's, in the words they say and in the thoughts that they think and what they are actually, if you like, even if they say they don't want to, if you talk about, all the things that you talk about, you focus on that you don't have, the lack, you live in a world of lack, you create more lack of whatever it is, because that's what you focus on. What you focus on grows, if you like. So that's something else that we always talk about.
So can I ask you, I mean, maybe share like a success story of someone who that you were able to help transform their lives using like your protocols and strategies?
Yeah, I've mentioned a few along the way. There's my client friend who, the one that had no confidence, her business was going down the pan, her relationship wasn't working, and she ended up, her partner of 32 years didn't recognize her. She's on stage with a microphone. The confidence just went through the roof. She found herself able to talk with people, and her business, boomed. Another guy, Kenneth, he's the one who said, you're the best coach I ever had. He made the decision because he couldn't make a decision. I didn't make the decision for him. I'm like, what do you want to do? What is wrong with your life? Do you want to keep working 80 hours a week? Well, no. I'm like, what do you want to do instead? And I think I'm old enough to retire. And then there was all this debate about where do I live and what. I'm like, where do you want to be? And he's not here. And then I get this message going, I put the house on the market, I've closed the business, I've retired. That's a big change. He could have carried on working till he dropped. I remember somebody else who, this was more of a business one, but whatever you're doing business wise or work wise, there is an overlap with your personal life. I don't care who you are. It's very, very difficult to actually cut it off completely. There is some level of overlap. So we're pretty much working with this person's business. She was an independent financial advisor. But the issue was she was working like crazy all hours. So it was impacting her personal life and her relationship and everything else, plus her finances. So she didn't have the quality of life she wanted. Her relationship was suffering. She didn't have any time. She wasn't earning the money that she could have in the time that she knew she had available. Now, where we focused was on her process for her work. And I remember we were sat there at the table and she turned to me with a Post-it note. Literally, a Post-it note, and I had seen it, and I thought, I'm just waiting, I'm waiting. She's going to notice in a minute. And she just looked at me and she went, Liz, oh my God, I've just realised I have written that exact same Post-it note 4 times. So her process basically meant that she was doing this one particular activity 4 different times. And it wasn't a quick part of the process. She's an independent financial advisor. She's getting information from her clients. So what she was doing when she went to visit them, she's making her notes by hand. Then she is typing them up or something to send to her VA. And then her VA put them in the system, and then she would go back to the clients, and it just went on. And I remember going, "Well, this is crazy. Can you not just go in with a laptop and put it direct into the system?" She's, yeah. And it just took that, I didn't, at that point, it was pretty obvious. You can set it up on the laptop, you can direct into the system in front of the clients. People are used to that now. And guess what happened? She was able to, literally cut down the amount of time she spent on every single job, which meant she was able to see more clients, which meant she was able to make more money. But it also meant, because she wasn't, quadrupling the amount of time she spent that was, making it unnecessary, she had more time left to do the things that she wanted to do. And then lo and behold, she got engaged, got married. So I think that was just such a tiny tweak, but it also shows how the overlap between your work or business and your personal life. A tweak here and there can have a massive difference elsewhere as well.
So what advice can you give to women that feel stuck, confused, or overwhelmed? They don't know what to do. Is there any first steps? Like, can you advise if they're in a tough situation, but they just got laid off or divorced or anything? Is it usually first steps you recommend to your clients, that what they should do or think or be?
Understand. I suppose the first thing is understand you're not alone. You're not the first person that this has happened to, and you're not going to be the last person that it happens to. And the power is in your hands to decide what you do now. If you're going to give into it and be a victim, or if you're going to stand up, put your big girl pants on and do something about it. And I'm not here going, I'm not a grief coach. There is no time limit on grieving for somebody, whether that is, somebody that has died, or, grieving for the loss of a relationship, that has to, go its natural course. But if the point is you've reached a crossroads in your life, what do you want to do about it? Do you want something different out of your life? I mean, some people, no, I don't. I mean, I was talking to somebody the other day who, funnily enough, I met on a train in France the other week, and she suddenly found me and said, I need to talk to you. I need a coach. So we're in the process of having this conversation, and she said, tell me about your book. And I explained a bit about it, and she said, I think the first thing I'm going to do is read your book. And so she went off and bought it. And I'm speaking to her again tomorrow. But I have had a number of people who have read that book and then contacted me and said, I need you to be my coach. This is what I need. So it's straight talking. You said earlier, I don't think anybody else does what you do. There's loads and loads of coaches out there, but nobody does what I do. This is a pretty unique approach. I know that for a fact. Because, I mean, nobody's had my life. Nobody's had my business experience, or done the courses that I've done, had the life experience or the business experience that I've had across all the different cultures and all the different roles that I've had. And nobody's had that. Nobody has done anything exactly the same, and certainly nobody has is teaching or coaching people on this framework like I am. I think the first thing is you have to make a decision. If you want to change something, that's the basic, fundamental decision. Do you want your life to carry on like this forever, or do you want to go, enough already? It has to change, and it starts now. And it's literally getting to that point where you know that enough is enough, and you have to take that first step to move you forward. And and that you recognize that you need help. And that is the thing that women, especially women who have had perhaps, good leadership roles and the like, that are used to being, in control, managing at work, managing the family, organizing everything and everybody. It's very, very hard to say, actually, I need help. I can't do this on my own. And there is no shame in it. Okay, that's the other thing. There is no shame. Something's happened. It's not good, but that kind of recognition that it's okay to ask for help, and you need to, take that first step. I think that's the fundamental piece there, and that's the hardest. That is the hardest step of actually admitting that something has to change and that you can't do it on your own, and then finding somebody that you're happy, that can, that understands where you're at, and that can help you through that process of getting out the other side to, live the life you want, find out who you are now.
So can I ask you, what is it that have you learned yourself from coaching all these other people? I mean, have you picked up something from working with all these different people?
I pick up things every day. I mean, I'm kind of, I'm in coach mode, whatever I'm doing, so I pick up things from everybody, basically. But my fundamental, underpinning, if you like, ethos now is, we and let's say doing everything from a place of love, if you like. I've come to the realization that really we often, we are all in fear about something, at different stages of our life. And some people have multiple fears, and some people have huge fears and all the rest of it. But the thing about being in fear is you cannot be in fear and love at the same time. You're either, operating, in love or in fear, if you like. So ideally, we all need to be on the road to love. And the more, I've done some experiments with this with some groups that I've been involved with about spreading love around the world and doing different things, and had some, amazing results with that. But the point about love really is, it's an inside job. First and foremost, it's an inside job. So you love yourself first. And basically, there's a quote from me: love is what, lights up and powers the world, if you like. But first you need to know how to turn it on. And this is the problem. People do not know how to turn it on, and they're always looking outside for love rather than inside. And when you start to look within and recognize that, love comes from within, it comes from how you treat yourself, how you talk to yourself, how you respect yourself and love yourself, then that radiates outward and creates a ripple effect, which ultimately will bring you the things that you desire. If that makes sense.
Absolutely, that's really amazing. I agree with you wholeheartedly about that. And thank you so much for sharing all your wisdom and everything. What is the best way that somebody had questions about today's interview, or they're interested in hiring you as a coach? What are the best ways for them to reach out to you?
Okay, anybody can email me. And my email is liz@elizabethcarney.co.uk. That's fairly simple. My website is elizabethcarney.co.uk. So that's fairly straightforward. Or you can find me on socials. I'm Elizabeth Carney on LinkedIn. I am on Facebook. I'm Elizabeth Carney and Liz Carney. I have a business page, and I have my personal profile. So you can find me in those places.
Is there any final thoughts you'd like to share with the audience before we wrap
Final
up our
thoughts. I would like to say, the first thing is, you have a choice. You always have choices. You are not alone, and there's no shame in reaching out for help that you may need, and that would be what I would say to everybody.
Liz, thank you so much for coming on this podcast and sharing all your tremendous amount of wisdom. I mean, you said I had never met somebody that had so much experience, both in corporate world, life experience, and been through so much. And the fact that you're smiling on the other side is really amazing. and you said you get so many testimonies for your clients. It's a true testament. Like your work is really amazing, and your coaching, you really do it out of love. So I really appreciate you coming on and sharing all your wisdom with the audience. I'm sure a lot of people are going to get a lot out of this interview today. So I really appreciate it.
Okay, thank you very much. It's been my pleasure to be here and talk with you. And I just hope that if somebody hears something, just one person hears one thing that helps, then it's does the job. That's what I'm about. One person at a time. Thank you.